And my business partner, Amardeep Sirha. Hey, Amardeep.
Hey, hi everybody.
How's it going? How's your week?
Yeah, it's been okay actually. I haven't done much and I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. So I'm not feeling 100%, but I've brought on my game face for our guest today, Usman.
Well, yeah, it's lucky it's 24 hours later, isn't it? I think yesterday, I've got to be honest, when we spoke in the morning, you didn't sound as good as you do now.
No, I wasn't too well yesterday, but I'm getting there, so that's good.
You've had a busy week, haven't you? I heard BBC Sounds, a little intro on there.
I did. I had a 60-second career. You might know about this actually, Usman, because I know that you have had some history in the BBC. I was on the Everyday Hustle with Sonia Barlow.
Nice.
I sent in a 60-second kind of career thing, which was really good, excellent. And then I went along last night just for like sort of 45 minutes to, she had like a bit of a book launch and a networking event for females in London. So I went along to that for a bit. So it was good. Yeah, I've had a bit of busy weeks despite not being well. But yeah.
Well done,
soldiering on. You know that? Oh, sorry, Ben, go on.
No, I'll say soldiering on, Ams. I like it.
I ain't got a choice. Do you know that podcast or the sort of like the show that she does, Usman?
I've heard it. I've not actually listened to it now. So, but you know, it's great achievement to get on it, I think. So, you know, well done.
Thank you.
On that note, let's bring Usman in. Usman Hamid, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really fortunate. I know you're a busy guy. Maybe do you want to start and do a brief intro? We've also caught you. I know you're a busy guy because you're halfway through your fuel lunch. So I know. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to give us a brief intro into who you are, your background, and what you're up to at the moment?
Sure. Yeah. So, look, happy to be on here today to chat to you lovely folks. So, Usman Hamid, predominantly worked in technology for about 20 years. Currently at GSK, doing some exciting stuff. Kind of growing up, I always wanted to be a rock star. So that's kind of where my passion first started for music. So I started off my career in the music industry, being in bands actually, and then happened to fall into tech quite coincidentally, working at the record label that I was signed to, doing artist website. So yeah, and then since then it's just been a springboard to different roles within technology really. But I had aspirations of being a rock star and living in a mansion somewhere in LA. But
I love that.
that actually never panned out. So, but yeah, you know, tech's a great career choice, and thoroughly enjoyed the last 20 years working in this space.
That's something the three of us have got in common then, because I don't think. Well, I know for a fact that Amardeep and I didn't. You know, when we were at school, we weren't thinking, yes, we want to be in technology. It's the kind of traits and interests and everything else that falls into it. Ams has got an interesting story. Ams, you used to be a teacher, didn't you?
Yeah. I've talked to Usman about this as well. Yeah, I used to teach economics and business. I taught that for around 8 years. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. It also wasn't something I grew up thinking I was going to do. I kind of did it because I followed my sister and she used to be a teacher. And again, I fell into technology, but I absolutely love it. I think you meet the most wonderful people in technology, and such a range of people as well. So that's how I kind of felt of it. I mean, is this what I also grew up thinking I wanted to do? No, I did want to be a rock star too, but you've got some musical talent. I've got none.
You just like Beyonce, yeah? You just sing in the shower. This is like
I sing anywhere. Yeah. So, but I mean, I also enjoy it as well. I enjoy it. So that's good.
So obviously, Usman, recently you've only joined GSK. Am I right in saying in the last kind of 3 or 4 months? Is it relatively new position? How was the journey in terms of coming on board? Was I guess interview processes remote, and because at your level, it's obviously maybe a little bit more intense when you can't do the kind of more face-to-face interviews or meetings.
Yeah, look, so you know, I think with the majority of hiring that's happened in the pandemic, it was remote. Worked really well actually, and I think the conversations have more shifted to being about the individual, I think, rather than the actual job itself. So I think a lot of the process was focused around me, my kind of background and what I could bring, and I think, you know, the kind of the overarching, you know, views that people have right now is this person capable, more so to actually do the role? What attributes do they bring? What's the right cultural fit? I think we're starting to move away from the box ticking, And I think these interviews have been really good because you get to see a bit of an intro to someone's life. So I can see Amardeep's living room, staircase, right, see a picture behind you. You know, I know my background's blurred, but I've got guitars back there. So it just acts as really great conversation starters for people, which I don't think you get through traditional interview processes when you're in a glass cubicle, so to speak, where you just sat across from someone.
I agree, and I also think as well, Usman, on that, it's when we first went into the pandemic, and it just brings us nicely onto the next topic, which is kind of like working life post-COVID. But it was a bit weird, wasn't it? Because not everybody had the right setup. I definitely did when I used to live in Camden. I used to do everything from my dining table, and I used to feel a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that you could see my background and you could see what's in my house, and I might have, I don't know, Jenga on the shelf behind me, whatever. But now I just feel like it is such a conversation start. I speak to so many people, and they're now in that position where they've set up a working space, wherever it might be, but you can just see so much of their life, and it brings you onto a nice natural conversation rather than, oh, so what are your interests? And you think, well, I'll just say the same things that everyone says. I like to run and go to the gym and cook. But really, I met you and I could see guitars in the background, and I already knew, like, straight away I could ask you about music. So it is really good. But it does leave it. Sorry, were you going to say something there?
No, there's a guy, a senior chap in technology who I know really well, a guy called Sasha Veltman, and I just had a catch up with him not too long ago. He works at Just Eat, really cool guy. But he was set up, and I know people looking on YouTube will be able to see this, kind of like a quarter of your screen, but the whole main background was this drum kit, and it was like a kick-ass drum kit. Like, it looked so good. Like, your guitar looks cool, don't get me wrong, but like, he had this like guitar, and I'm like, wow, like Guns N' Roses are just gonna like rock up. They could just start doing like a concert in his room and look wicked. So no, yeah, it's very, very interesting, isn't it? What's in terms of the challenges now with GSK, then I guess whenever you come into a new role at your level, there's huge challenges and big objectives. What's the kind of current main targets and objectives that you're looking to sort out?
So there's a lot of team building happening right now within GSK. I mean, it's well publicised that we're splitting the organisation into two separate entities, one for consumer healthcare and one for the pharma vaccines business. So I'm working on the consumer healthcare side right now, and we're building the team capability from the ground up, actually, right now, from a position of zero. So I think all the hiring stuff is really relevant to us right now, and how we think about culture, how we think about diversity, how we bring our learnings from our previous roles into this new world to kind of shape it for success from day one. So we're not bringing a lot of the headaches that we had in our previous orgs into this world. It was a really unique opportunity for me, because very rarely do you get to work in a semi-greenfield space. It's kind of brownfield a lot of the time. I mean, I know Amardeep from like Sky and other places where you kind of brought into legacy processes, right? And you've got to try and adapt to it. We're trying to figure out what that process is right now and what's going to work well. And we're having a very rich conversation about, well, what's going to work well, and creating healthy challenges with each other to really shape something that's going to work and sustain for the long term. And then that,
just on that one point, I want to ask you a question. So do you find that because you've got the kind of greenfield to play with, the people, the market, and people available to come and work for you, have you got a bigger pool of people to play with? I ask that because, generally speaking, engineers and people that work in engineering, as much as they might enjoy doing the legacy stuff, greenfield is great for an engineer. They love that kind of stuff, of course. So you finding you've got a lot more choice, or not?
I wouldn't say necessarily that's true overall. So we've still got the big enterprise systems that we need to run the business. So things like the SAPs of this world and your Workday still exist. But from a digital product perspective, that's where we're entering into like a new realm. But I think the common modern skills that we're looking for in the market, everyone's looking for right now, whether it be looking at things like React, Node.js, DevOps ability, working with GCP, Azure, or AWS, or any kind of cloud provider. It's quite a congested market, and talent is quite scarce. So,
really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it is, and especially, I guess, where there's so much choice right now, and actually the candidates are actually driving a lot of the preferences and how they want to work, like being remote first most of the time. I know people who have moved out of London to places like Wales and Cardiff, and you've got to work within that dynamic to really find people who are going to be effective. And it's great that as we're moving into different working habits, we've got the ability to work remotely. But there's also then value in the flip side for having that human interaction on a kind of an ad hoc basis, where you can come together as a team, maybe do some sprint planning, and maybe do things as in a room together to create that culture and way of working. So very difficult balancing.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I found that, again, going back to like the post-COVID working life, I'm predominantly working from home based on the clients that we work with. Our employees are fully remote at the moment, and I do pop into the offices now and then, but I do crave a little bit of that face-to-face contact. And what you just said, sprint planning, and the first thing that came to my mind was when you go into a sprint planning or you're going into a retro or any sort of event like that as part of a team, and someone brings some biscuits along, and the first 5-10 minutes of the meeting is just having a general chat, and you kind of lose that on Zoom or whatever, because you join the meeting, and even if it's 1 minute past the hour of the meeting, you apologize for being late, even though you're not late, and there's no sort of face to face. So, and I understand that people, there is a huge preference to work from home or work remotely, let's call it, but that's interesting, because a lot of people are now just either changing career or changing their company, because as we go back into kind of somewhat new normal world, they're looking at their employers, and their employers are like, well, back to work 9 to 5 in the office, and they're kind of like, no. And you're right, the control has gone a little bit into the market of the candidate saying, well, if that's an expectation on me now, I'd rather not work for you, like, with all due respect. And I see a lot of people changing companies that they've been loyal to for 10 years just because those flexible working patterns are not a thing for them. So it is really good.
What I'm finding quite funny at the moment is there's the new adverts, isn't it? The on TV, the like Transport for London. It's like encouraging us to go back to the office and encouraging people to get back on the trains and go in. And I think that you're absolutely right about people moving outside of London. So I live in West Sussex, so I guess halfway in East Grinstead, near Gatwick Airport, halfway between London and Brighton. House prices like just soared, like in my area through lockdown, because people are selling houses in, £1 million houses in Richmond and buying £3 million houses down, value wise down here. So you can get so much more for your money. So it has changed the landscape completely. But I guess from in my position when I'm speaking to, 20 odd engineers a day, I still would say that, the common consensus is this hybrid model of 2 or 3 days a week from home and 2 or 3 days a week in the office. I was really fortunate with a customer of mine a few weeks ago who invited me out on their team night out, which is great when you work in partnership with your customers. And we went out and played mini golf. But it was actually the first time that some of these guys have been to the office. This is the first time they'd actually met physically face to face. So I think if people aren't going into the office, because I think it's a personal choice right now, Hamid is absolutely right in terms of retros, in terms of particular meetup. I think it is really important that still does happen. Even if your team's in Cardiff, moving to Wales, for example, definitely to get themselves in, as best they can once a month or what have you. But it's challenging. You're absolutely right. It's the market is so candidate driven, isn't it, in terms of the tech stack and all the things you're talking about, the positions that we're looking at today, to be honest with you, and the skills shortage is there, it is real. But it's, like I say, it's challenges that I think is ultimately going to, that we're still trying to work out that happy medium, I guess. And in terms of your team, is this I guess, would you be looking after, I guess, a lot of kind of product applications? Are you looking after product teams and then engineering teams as well then, or?
Yeah, so obviously we're building that capability right now within my current organisation. So we're actually hiring full stack engineering squads right now. And look, I think just on that point, I'm based in Manchester. Okay, born and raised in this area from a little town called Rochdale. But current company is a London-based company, right? And I'm there 4 days a month right now, and we tend to gravitate around when I'm there, so the team comes together, so we can do things like team lunches. I can take someone for a coffee and I just have a chat about them, what's happening in their personal life, and I really value that type of conversation. I think if we're just doing task-based stuff and sat on calls all day, you can do that from anywhere. So when I do go into the office and I just see people just sat on back-to-back calls there, you know, there's no value of you being in the office at that point. So it is those team-based events, right, that are really valuable. And the few times that I've been in London recently, you know, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get a flight from Manchester to London, you know, you don't miss that stuff, right?
No one misses the commute, I don't think.
At all, really. But you know, but once you're there and you're feeding off this energy of people around you and having these rich conversations, and actually, I have found that being in the room together does lead to accelerated decision making. Actually, because you can read the room a lot better in terms of people's expressions. And then just going out in the evening to, you know, pub for a gastro pub for some lunch or some dinner with the team, building those relationships. That's what is really working well right now. And, you know, I think we just got to accept the fact that people are going to, you know, want that kind of ability to work from home. And, you know, we had this saying before, didn't we, that you live to work or you work to live. I don't think it's either of those things right now. I think you know, living life is part of work, and that's what people are looking for, is that your work kind of adapts around your day-to-day living. So whether you got to do a school run or whether you've got to, you know, go out for a walk to keep active at lunchtime and maybe take a call on your headphones walking around, it's that type of mindset. So it's not an exclusive either or thing anymore. No. So yeah, so that's the main shift that I can see, and from the people that we're interviewing, that's what we're getting back as feedback as well, actually.
And I think it's this new forced way of thinking of trust. I don't think a lot of employers trusted their employees, and I think that's what I've seen in my network of like personal friends and just my professional friends as well. You know, when people are saying to me, like one of my friends recently, she said, "I'm just gonna quit." She's back in the office 4 days a week at the moment. She works in head office side of retail, and I was like, "What? You have to?" I was confused. I was like, "You have to go into work?" And she was like, "Yeah, 4 days a week, no matter what. We go in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we have Friday at home. And there's an incentive. If you hit your KPIs, you won't have to come in on the Friday. However, every 2 months we'll look at everyone's KPIs, and if you haven't hit them, then you have to go in." So it's being used as like an incentive, and I was like, I don't think that's right. And she was like, "No, neither do I." So she just decided to just quit. She said, "I'll probably stay in the same industry, in the sector, but I'm not going to work for an employer that clearly doesn't trust me." The more I hear the word trust, I'm like, I'm kind of like, I don't think they do. I'll be really honest. That kind of micromanagement, we need to leave back in the 1990s. I don't know why we still need that. 1980s maybe even. But,
yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think there's certain companies out there who are used to a kind of a mode of hybrid working pre-pandemic. I think those companies have adapted quite well because they've had the right tools and processes in place to support their workforce around that. I think more traditional or heritage organizations, I'm thinking about law firms, maybe, I'm thinking about retail offices, that's where there has been that mindset of, if you're not visible, you're not working type of approach.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think they've really struggled from the conversations that I've had with people that work in that industry to really create that trust and actually, you know, and have the kind of mindset of, you hire smart people and they you know, get them to do what they want, rather than having to micromanage people. And just because someone sat on a desk in front of a laptop doesn't mean they're being productive, really.
No, of course not. It's really interesting. I think this whole kind of trust thing is what's driving the market at the moment, and why it's a little bit candidate rich in terms of, I've heard a lot of people, I've listened to a few podcasts recently, and people have said things like, "Oh, candidates are becoming too demanding." They've said different things, and I understand that candidates now have different expectations from an employer. I wouldn't call it demanding. I think times have changed, and this if pandemic showed us anything, of course there are certain industries where they do just have to go into the office because of what they do, and I get that. But where you don't have to, and you can put in the tools to do it, it comes down to management. And people don't work for companies. They work for leaders, or they work for a boss that they absolutely adore. You see lots of leaders leave a company and a swarm of staff go at the same time because they want to work for that person. And that was one of my first tastes in technology. When I worked at Sky, I worked there and stayed there and wanted to be there because of the head of tech at the time. And I didn't want to work for anybody else. So at that point, it didn't matter if it was Sky or someone else. Just so happened that Sky was good as well. But and I think that's just really interesting that a lot of companies, I think, we saw a big unfortunate closing down of lots of businesses and industries because of the pandemic. And I think now it might be because they're not willing to change and move forward with what we as a world have experienced. Really interesting.
I think with a lot of candidates I speak to, I think the ones who have been looked after and the ones who have had that flexibility, going back to the leaders that you're talking about, they're the ones who's in their position. Hey, they recognise the value that they've had, and they're not for moving because in a crazy world where they're going to get opportunities thrown at them all the time, they do remember how they were looked after during the dark times. And I think it's actually, you can tell anybody who's been at the company now for a couple of years would have gone on that journey, and it actually reflects quite well. Question for you both, maybe more for you, Ams, and in terms of this kind of like post-COVID way of working now, what's the biggest challenges that you find? Because I hear you both talking obviously about the remote aspect. Ams, I know that you, for example, will always do work, you work between product teams and engineering teams. Some of the biggest challenges when you're on site is getting the two of them talking. Is that going to be harder now when we're all remote? How would you come over those kind of challenges?
You know what's really interesting? It's such a conflict for me because I am such an advocate of continuously changing and iterating the way in which one works to make you the most productive, right? I'm a smart worker, not a hard worker. But it is a conflict for me even because I do believe if you can productively do your job from home or from wherever you want to do it, sat on a beach for all I care, then go ahead and do it. But there is still a voice inside me that misses face-to-face contact. There is, when I do go into the office on client side a couple of times a week, sometimes me grabbing a person and literally having a 10-15 second conversation answers loads of questions for me, and I don't get that at home unless I put in a meeting or speak to them on Slack or something. And now people's diaries, I've never had my diary this back to back like in my life, and I think that is as a result of working remotely. So it's a real balance, and I know lots of companies try and strive for no meeting Fridays and stuff like that. Whether it works, I'm unsure. I don't know if that actually works. But in terms of being the glue between product and engineering, going back to your question, Ben, do I find it harder now? I would say it's the same. I think it's the same because that was down to human nature rather than being in an office or not. So it's the same challenge for me, and I've got loads of tools now to kind of enforce it because I'm working remotely.
How about you, Usman? I know that you're talking about kind of looking at, and I can tell you're a leader who looks after their staff and worried about staff welfare. And I think that when you hire staff and onboard staff, that's a big challenge. When we're in this kind of post-COVID world, is that, would you go along with that, or does this kind of remote working throw up other challenges for you?
I think being fortunate enough to work in environments where we've had a model of hybrid working that's been embedded for a long time. So when I was at the BBC, for example, flexibility in terms of where you worked was a big part, right? The same thing at Barclays when throughout the pandemic, and now kind of GSK. I think it's just a natural evolution of the way of working, actually, and there's always going to be that resistance where you have huge developments that are kind of empty now. If you look at things like Canary Wharf, for example, it's all geared around the banking sector there, so all the shops and restaurants. So you have to look at it from a commercial perspective, is that there's a lot of revenue being lost there for small businesses. So there is some kind of balancing need of being in or out. And then I also think it's role specific as well. So if you're frontline, for example, if you're working in retail and you're on the shop floor, then you can't really do that job remotely, right? So I think it's not an exclusive thing where everyone can work from home or not, but I think people will naturally find a rhythm that works for them. And personally, what I found is I've worked from home for 2 years, right? And I've started to go back into the office right now. And for a lot of people, there'll be that initial energy to be in the office quite a lot. And then they'll get used to the drain of the commute, spending 2 hours on a tube, getting home really late, not being able to interact with their family. And then I think it will naturally balance out into that flexible model where a 2-3 day split, or whatever it might be, will happen. So I think everyone's worried right now, but I think it will normalize over time. And I think that's going to take a bit of learning the next kind of 6 to 9 months as we come out of the tail end of the pandemic into the new year. I think things will normalize, and there'll be some people who absolutely thrive and want to be in the office because their home environment's not equipped for them to be productive enough. And then the other people who can absolutely love finishing a meeting and going looking after their kids, maybe something like that. So it's very hard to have one rule, one size fits all rule, really. And sometimes the conversation just gets so binary. Every time I see a LinkedIn post, it's like it's an in or out thing. Are you in the work from home camp or you're not? And it's just so more new. It's so more nuanced than that. I think people sometimes miss it. That it's a deeper conversation actually than just a black and white one, which is a yes no answer.
Agreed. And so when you start to build out this workforce that you're trying to create at GSK, are you open to? I can see that you're an advocate for the hybrid model, which I think a lot of people are. It's probably the better option. But what if somebody says, I'd rather be in the office the majority of the time, or someone says, I'd rather be at home the majority of the time, and they kind of fall outside of the hybrid camp? Are you guys open to that kind of working as well?
So I think for me personally, right, I think what has always worked best is, I think you mentioned it before, output is always king for me, right? So, however people are most productive is something that I'm quite attuned to get the best out of people. There's no point forcing people to be in the office if they're not energized to be in the office, which will impact their productivity. So we have to really speak to the individual to find out what works for them. So it's not an exclusive, in or out conversation. And then the second thing that's driving a lot of this is, where is the talent right now? So, if there's a really talented candidate in Glasgow, for example, and they're a great cultural fit for the organisation, then why wouldn't you hire that individual if they can bring real value to your organisation? And then you centre or organise being in the office for event-based stuff or team-based activities when it actually makes sense for you to do face-to-face conversations, right? So otherwise, you're missing out on great talent. And I think that's one of the benefits of in this post-pandemic world, is that your talent pools are starting to become more broader than the M25 area in London, for example, or like Leeds and like Manchester, where we started to see a lot of critical mass being built in terms of technology. So if you look at Manchester, for example, you've got Sainsbury's, you've got Talk, you've got the BBC, you've got ITV, Kellogg's are there as well. Leeds, you've got Sky and Channel 4. And then in London, you've got everyone basically there. But people have to move sometimes, they have to relocate. So I think this does open up really flexible opportunities, and I am seeing people taking lower paid salary jobs just because they can work remotely or have that flexibility. And that's how important this has come. And this conversation happening right now.
And I was going to ask a question as well, like what I'm finding as well is, I know obviously in technology if you need a Python engineer, you need someone who can write Python. I understand that, but the kind of other careers within technology, I don't necessarily now need to look at, if I'm looking for a delivery manager, somebody that's done delivery management in a technology company for 5 years, I'm actually looking wider and looking at career changes that might have had a really healthy career in a different industry, but have all the skill set. And now I'm getting this even more diverse group of people into the company. And I think with the pandemic and with post-COVID working and personal challenges that people have faced, a lot of people have decided to change their career. And it's giving people like me definitely a wider scope, because having been given an opportunity in technology for myself, an ex-teacher, I'm always curious to see a CV from a different background if I'm looking for like a product owner or a delivery manager or something. So that's that. Do you find that at GSK you're getting applicants that are not just technology background, but other backgrounds as well, and they're trying to transfer their skill set. Cool.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people doing that, not just for in this current organisation, but I also saw it in my previous role as well. Women coming back from maternity leave, for example, who have gone through coding boot camps and programs because they realise that's what they want to do. And I think it's great, right? Because it just opens up different avenues from a career perspective for people, and we should be encouraging it at all levels, actually. So I don't think it's just a specific problem for where I'm at right now. I think it's happening everywhere. We're seeing those career returners come in, people changing careers, and I think that's the beauty right now, that in this post-pandemic world, if we broaden the catchment area, we're going to get all these candidates coming through that we might not have seen before. And again, the days of robotic CV screening as well, and how that used to work, that's something that's kind of not sat well with me for a long time, because I've some of the best people that I've ever worked with have no formal qualifications at all, right? And on the flip side, maybe just my experience, and I'm not generalizing, I hope, but I've hired people who have got all the CHPPs, the Agile, the Prince 2s, and they can't translate that academic knowledge into the real world experience.
Agreed.
And I always ask the question, right? If you had two candidates in front of you who were the same age, one was a recent graduate who had maybe got all the certifications, and then one who was an apprentice who's been doing the job for 5 years. Who would you hire?
Yeah, no, agreed. You take the apprentice. I mean, I think gone are the days of. For me, again, this is very personal, because I know that in some careers you do need the qualifications, etc. But I really don't care what your GCSE grades were. I don't care what your A-level grades were. And unless your degree is directly relevant to the role you're doing, like, for example, in medicine or law, what is it showing me? And I've got a younger brother who is an incredible entrepreneur. He's only around 29, and he's been entrepreneurial since he was about 15, and he's got no real formal qualifications. He went, he's done this, he did like a GMVQ. It just wasn't very academic, but he has got some qualifications. And the amount of roles he's been turned down for because he hasn't got a degree. And he came over recently, and he was asking me my advice, and he was like, I don't like, what would that degree show? That I'm in debt, or that I can finish a qualification? And the roles he has ended up in have paid more, have been more flexible, and he's absolutely loved the people he works with. Fortunately, now he works for himself, and he doesn't need to work for an employer, but because he works for himself. And the people he takes on are all, he gives people a chance that have not got a degree, who chose not to go down an academic route. And I just can't believe there was a time when, if I didn't get A stars or A's or something like that, my GCSEs, I wouldn't have got a job. I just don't understand the correlation anymore. And that's me, an ex-teacher, saying that.
Well, as a recruiter, I've seen it change over literally throughout the pandemic, and it's interesting listening to what you guys are saying there, because it's also happened within technology as well. So, say for example, something that's huge, that's become more and more relevant is obviously data engineering in the throughout the pandemic, right? And the amount of full stack engineers, Java engineers who ultimately have the same kind of DevOps kind of cultural way of working and mindset, who have suddenly stopped and have kind of assessed what they're doing and where the market's going and what they want to do, and upskilling themselves within data engineering and going for data engineering jobs. Because I think it's, engineers in general, very kind of clever guys, see where the market's going, but it's the more interesting work. And I think a lot of people have actually stopped, kind of refocused on what's important to them, what do they want to learn, and move on. So I've seen a lot of that. Usman, I know you're a very busy guy, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm going to make one prediction as well off the back of, again, this kind of new post-COVID way of working and people going to the office. I go to London now every Thursday, so it's an hour in and an hour out for me. So for me, it's good to go in on a Thursday. Do you know why? Because everyone's up for a beer on a Thursday. The pubs in London, I don't know about Manchester, but I tell you what, it is, because I just think the whole world has suddenly gone, hang on a minute, I can wake up in the morning on a Friday, get an extra half hour in bed. I work from home. Yeah, exactly, yeah. That's one of the biggest observations I've seen. I don't know about you guys, but that's my big bold prediction.
That's really interesting that you say that. I also believe it as well, because it doesn't strip away from their weekend. It doesn't take away their Friday night either for whatever they want to do. So I quite agree with that.
Thursday night collaboration strategic meetings are I think are going to be here to stay, I reckon. But listen, Usman, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Is it okay if obviously we're going to post this out on our pods and LinkedIn if people reach out to you, have any questions, want to kind of communicate with you about how you're doing, how you're scaling your team, and questions regards kind of post-COVID world? Are you quite open to receiving connections and questions?
Yeah, look, I do a lot of mentoring for people getting into technology anyway. You'll see me quite active on LinkedIn anyway. So where I've got an extended network and I might be able to connect people in like junior roles. I've done a lot of that in the past. So, I like to see people be successful. And I think back to a time when we didn't have LinkedIn and we didn't have these opportunities. So yeah, I'm more than happy to connect with anyone, really to have a chat about anything, really, even if it's just about life. It's fine for me. So happy to.
That's great. That's great. I think everyone needs people like that. Well done. That's great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Someone in your position, that's a great thing to do. And listen, all the best with that. I know it's not such a new job now, but obviously it's still relatively new. Obviously got a lot of work to do. So it's all the best with that. And we look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Usman.